John chapter 2, where Jesus is lined up there at the wedding with his disciples and his mom, and they ran out of wine. And this is that first miracle that Jesus really does in Galilee that manifests just who he is and what he really is all about. Now, to really bring us into the context of John chapter 2, I want us to go back into John chapter 1 just a little bit and see what's going on there. And there in those first 16 verses or so, we get John telling us the Christmas story, that Jesus takes on flesh and he dwells among us. He doesn't do it like Matthew and Luke tells it with the shepherds and the angels and the wise men. He just says, Jesus now dwells among us. He is tented, he's got his flesh on, and he is now among us. That's the way it is. That's his Christmas story. Jesus has arrived. And then shortly after that, there's this man coming out of the wilderness, John the Baptist. He's got the crazy hair, and I love this picture that some movie came up with, saying this crazy guy from the wilderness with the camel's hair clothing. He's eating the heads of locusts and with wild honey. He's just a crazy person. And Jesus says, you know what? You're the one that is going to be my pastor. Not probably how we would have done it here at Lakeside, but that's how Jesus does things. The testimony of John says, you know what? This is Jesus. He's the Son of God. I have been called out of the wilderness to fulfill the prophecy of the Old Testament. And here I am. This is Jesus. And then Jesus says, go ahead and baptize me in the river right here. And so it was. Jesus was then baptized. And he's making his way along the seas, and he sees his disciples. They didn't know that he was the disciples yet. And in his working these miracles, he says he's going to give them two words. Two words, and the disciples are going to drop everything and follow Jesus. And he looks at them and he says, follow me. Okay. They dropped their nets. They stopped where they were. They told Dad, we're moving on, and they followed Jesus. And not only that, they were seeing their friends along the way, and they said, you know what? We found the Messiah. You have to come and see who he is. So these first disciples are called as well. But now Jesus up in Galilee is going to do this manifestation of his God's glory in him. And he's going to change the water into wine. Now remember, in the Epiphany season, we're really talking about God's glory being seen in Jesus. Jesus, who eventually is going to make his way to the cross when we get through the Lenten season and to Good Friday. But for right now, we're trying to see the glory of Jesus, or the glory of God in Jesus. And we're going to see how remarkable this is when it comes to our application of this as well. And so the first really miracle that we can find here in John chapter 2 that is a credit to his first big sign that he does is this water into wine. Now, when we look at this miracle of the wedding of Canaan, we're going to see it very deeply and broadly. We're going to look at this at big picture stuff here. We can always really pick it apart and narrow it down and look very closely at it, connect it into the Old Testament, and see the deliverance for Moses and all this stuff. But we're going to look at big picture this morning in this whole thing. So the first thing is in this big picture is that we've got this wedding. Jesus, Mary, the disciples, all invited to this wedding feast. When you look at the big picture through all the Bible, what comes to your mind about a wedding? Jesus, the bridegroom, the church, the bride. What Jesus is giving us a little foretaste here, a little bit of a foundation is when his teachings come down further on, he says, now, remember how this all goes? I am the bridegroom, you are the bride. I'm bringing you together. Now remember the days of Jesus, if you were not married, what life would be like. You would just be getting the crumbs of society. You would have to make life on your own, and it would be the handouts. And you'd be in poverty, and you would be at the whim of someone's goodwill walking by, throwing you something. But if you were brought into a marriage, this is going way back into Ruth and Naomi as well. If you're brought into a marriage, suddenly you're delivered from the life of poverty and of pestilence and of low living. Now you're brought into deliverance, into the hand that's going to provide for you. Same thing with Jesus and the bride, the church. We once had nothing. We once were disconnected from all things. The only thing in store for us was condemnation. But Christ, the bridegroom, invites us into the marriage feast of the wedding. And now we've got deliverance from our sin and place in the glory of God in His Son, Jesus Christ, in the eternal wedding banquet. So the church sees this happening as a foretaste in this. But let's go a little bit further into this. The glory of God the Father, of Jesus in you. You see what's happening here? You got the wedding and you. God's glory in Jesus wrapping itself right around you. That's what's going on. And so then John says, these are the beginnings of these signs of Jesus. He says, I could write many more that would fill up many, many more books. But these have been written so that you may believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. You got it right there towards the end of John's book. So the beginning of these signs of who this Jesus is. And we already get a glimpse of it, that God's glory is in Jesus, not to make Jesus awesome and wonderful. He's already God from heaven. All this glory coming into Jesus is for you. We see it in the wedding, how it comes and flows out. But let's go one step further into this, the water. Well, it's the water that's going to get turned into wine. Anyone wants water. We don't want water at the wedding. We need wine. That's how it works around here. But the water, when we look big picture, we see the whole concept of the water bringing us deliverance in our very baptism. We nailed baptism down last weekend with the baptism of Jesus. That is all what it's about. For deliverance from sin, death, and the devil, giving of the forgiveness of sins, and deliverance into everlasting life. But this water now also connects us to our baptism, in which we are delivered from our death and given into a relationship with Jesus, who has the glory of God in Him. So once again, the glory of God comes down to Jesus and flows itself onto us. But let's go further. You've got the wine. You've got the wedding. You've got the water. You've got the wine. And this wine, of course, is giving us a little glimpse of that banquet table of everlasting life, that wine that comes to us on the night when Jesus was betrayed. All the disciples were there and wondering, Jesus is going to die. We're going to be eternally disconnected from the Messiah. We're going to be disconnected from the rabbi. He's going to be arrested. He's going to be tried. He's going to be killed. He predicted his death numerous times. And now it's going to happen. And so Jesus, to try and figure this all out for the disciples, says, take and eat, take and drink. This connects us for an eternity. The glory of God comes into Jesus and is distributed in the bread and the wine to the disciples. God's glory through Jesus into them. That's how this works. This little wedding's giving us this big picture. It's saying, here are the things, so that when they come down later on, you're going to understand this more clearly. The abundant blessings come down. The abundant blessings of heaven come upon us. Now, in life, we tend to forget about these things. Now, I don't know how many times you hear it from our grandparents that, count your blessings. But really in life, what we do is that we focus in on sometimes the wrong things. We focus in on where we're discontent, we're dissatisfied. We want this and we want that, and we covet things. That the 9th and 10th commandment come into play here. We're not satisfied, we're discontent, and we focus on these things. When reality says, like in this miracle, we need to count the blessings. And when God blesses something, it becomes much more abundant. Here's some fish, here's some bread, it's abundantly blessed more than what you could ever dreamed of. The wine is blessed more than you could ever dream of. We are blessed more than we could ever dream of. The abundant blessings can do much immeasurably more in us than what we could ever dream of. That's the abundant blessings of God coming to us in Jesus. So this wedding in Cana gives us this big picture that the church can grasp. We are married to Jesus Christ. God's glory in Jesus to us. We are that bridegroom, that bride to the bridegroom. God's blessings, God's glory, God's abundance coming to us through Jesus in our baptism. God's glory, God's blessings, God's abundance, God's gifts, all He comes to us in his body and his blood, we have it today. All these blessings are upon us, and what happens to these blessings in us from God is that they bear fruit through us. So Epiphany reminds us that God's glory is in Jesus. And when he's doing these things that show his glory, we know they're designed for us. God's glory in Jesus is always designed to bubble over onto us. The cup of Jesus runs over unto us, and now our cup runneth over as well. That's how this all goes. God's glory now comes through you, that we love one another. Remember the two big missions of the church? That we are to love God and love others. That up relationship and the out relationship, that's what it's all in. So God's glory comes in us and through us to the people we love and care about. God's glory comes in us and through us to the people that are along our path. God's love comes in and through us into relationships that are there very briefly, into relationships that are there long term. And that's one of the things where we really get down to is God's people are the people of the world all seeing the glory of God in us through Jesus Christ? Or do they see a different picture? What do people see in us? The glory of God coming through us in Jesus, in our baptism, in the supper, in the abundant blessings that we receive through the Holy Spirit and various other means. God's glory through you. So now how does this all fit in with stewardship? To kick off a Stewardship Sunday. How does this all work? Now, normally we think that a stewardship, oh, here comes the money sermon. You know, get out the checkbooks and pastor, really get out there and guilt them because we've got bills to pay. You know, that's not how it works. That's law of motivation. Stewardship and money sermons are all about, short-term things. It hurts us in our stewardship in the long run when we realize, gee, we need money, we better pay because there's bills to pay. No, that's not stewardship. That's law of motivation. We no longer live by the law, we live to God, as Paul would say in Galatians. We live to God. So what does this really mean then? Stewardship really means this. God's glory has come into us, and it flows out of us. God's love has come into us and flows out of us. God's care, God's mercy, God's peace, God's grace, all these big abundance of who he is comes into us, and it flows out of us. And now we take care of this. We're the stewards of God's blessings, God's abundance, God's giftedness in us. And we take care of how this goes. We have been charged with it. It's our calling. Now get this right here. Most people in life, they're going to go off to college, they're going to find their career, they're going to work in their career, they're going to work in order to pay their bills, they're going to work in order to have a nice retirement lined up for them, and that's what they see their calling is. That's the way of normalcy. How normal people live. For those of us that have received the forgiveness of sins in Jesus Christ, the glory of God the Father in heaven, giving us complete salvation, we realize that we go off to school, go off to college, get a career, and do things for our retirement. But those are all designed for the glory of God, our calling as a Christian. Those are the resources for the calling that we have as a Christian. We become stewards of all these blessings. Most people will go into a career because they like it, because it makes them happy, because it suits them. Their gift set for that. It's all about them. Stewardship realizes I'm saved in Jesus' precious holy name. All these things that I do that are exciting and happy and working hard for others, it's all to resource my calling in Jesus. You have a special calling as a baptized child of God. He has called you into something unique and wonderful and great. And our career, our gift sets, all these things, our portfolios are all designed to fulfill and resource your specific calling in Jesus' holy name. That is what stewardship is. Stewardship is looking at who God is in great awe and wonderment. He saved me, someone who shouldn't be saved, but he did it out of love. That's what God does. God is the stewardship of the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And he pours it all out for other people. Jesus did not go to the cross for a career event. He went to the cross as the resource to save us, his merits to save us from death. Now, my first congregation, and not that I know anything more 26 years ago about the pastoral ministry than I know now, but something odd was really happening before my eyes. And it really hit me. What was happening was that there was people that would buy new things for their house, and they would take the old used things and bring it to the church to use. Well, I'm done with it. I got brand new. I'm going to give it to the church to use. And I'm going, I don't know a lot about stuff, but somehow that's backwards. That's not right. And I'm trying to pin my finger on this. What is really going on here? What's missing in that is the awe of God himself in our lives. The awe of God's glory coming to us in Jesus, entering us in this wedding, entering us through the water and the word, entering us through the sacrament of the altar, entering us with abundant blessings. Let me illustrate this in another way. Say that you are connected with a church that needs a new roof, right? You're supposed to smile at that because we got a new roof on this. And in the last 2 weeks, a new roof went on. In case you haven't noticed, there's all new roof. Now, why in the world does a church really need a new roof? Well, you don't want to sit down in the pew and have a leak come down on you. You don't want to be in a place where mold starts to build up and get worse and breathing and all this stuff like that. You know, those are common practical reasons why we need a new roof. But guess who they center around? You, right? Let's become the bride of the bridegroom for just a second here. Why in the world does the church have a new roof? Because this is the place where God's awe is happening. This is the place where the gown of his cloak is filling it up. This is his holy place. This is where God comes and he places his hand on his people and he says, receive the complete forgiveness of sins in Jesus Christ. This is the place where God's awesomeness comes to us in the body and blood and he empowers us with his giftedness and he says, I am holy. I am here and I am integrating and connecting with you, my dear children, my dear church, my dear bride. This is the place where the holy baptism comes upon a child or an adult and cleanses them of their sins. This is the very place where special things happen that are miracles. If there's any place in all of Venice that should have a new roof, it's the place where thy glory dwells. It is the place where God is. It is the place where he interacts with his gifts to his people and miracles happen. If there's any place, this is the place that needs the new roof. Lord, let my little abode suffer, but not the house of the Lord. Stewardship is taking care of the glory of God in us. Let's look at this here. Stewardship is God's glory through you. Now, I don't know what it costs for a new roof on a church that's this massive. You know, maybe $12,000, $15,000, right? You know, a little being facetious there. But you know what? It doesn't matter. The resources to pay for the new roof, to take care of the mold, to take care of everything down the line for all these 5 buildings on campus, they're here. The resources are here. Within 12 months, I would be inclined to think that this would be all done and taken care of because of God's glory, because of who he is in our relationship with him. That's what God does through his people. That's the stewardship of the resurrection of Jesus Christ in us. It's not a money serve and give because we're in need. We give because Jesus is risen and we're on his team. and we glorify his holy name with our gifts and our talents and our abilities, whatever that may look like. The stewardship of God is through you. Let me close with this story. It's in Walmart yesterday, beautiful Walmart. And just walking along, and I'm running through things. We need this for the house, got to have this. We need the pictures and all this stuff, and adding things up in mind. Here's what our budget is, and all these things, and trying to be the dad and the head of the house that takes care of all things financial. And around the corner is this gentleman being pushed in a wheelchair by either a parent or a guardian, whatever, and it's a special needs person. I don't know what their diagnosis was, but he just looks at me, we make eye contact, and he's just filled with excitement that I acknowledge him and he's acknowledging me. And he gives me this greeting of a smile and happiness. And I look at him and I say, "Hey, buddy, how in the world is God in you today?" And he's not able to verbalize, but the excitement of his arms and the great smile of the parent or guardian is just filling my cup up. It's taken me away from the way of the world, and filling me up with God's glory through someone I'd never met before. I never will meet that person again, but I will never forget the look on that gentleman's face when we made that eye contact, and he was Jesus to me for a split second, bringing me back to the glory of God, not in me, but in him to me. And that's exactly what I needed. Pastors, more than ever, need the glory of God in the people to them, because it's a tough spot. Stewardship now is the blessings, the glory, the gifts, the grace, the mercy, the hospitality, the spiritual gifts, the prophecy, the giving, the stewardship, the hospitality, on and on and on, all different, unique, and diverse in God's people, coming out in ways that bless abundantly. Bless abundantly. God has come unto us and blessed us abundantly. This we know by the resurrection of Jesus Christ in us. Amen. The peace that passes all understanding, keep our hearts and minds focused on Jesus Christ now and forever. Amen. We can now continue with the gathering of the offering.